Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a special episode of The Catalyst, where I have dressed up as someone puts it, a mix between Steve Jobs and Hugh Hefner. But, you know, we're rolling with, with what we're
Yeah,
rolling
what's
with.
going on?
Well, it's a special day. Today's July 27th, and I've worked 2 years for this day. So I really appreciate everyone listening and watching to this episode. This is one of the most important things I'm going to be doing in my life. And Alex is playing a big role in what I'm doing in my life because today I'm launching my startup to the world that I've been working on for the past 2 years. Alex is investing in that startup. And today is a interview of kind of me asking Alex how he thinks about the market opportunity, the gap, the niche that this startup is trying to solve in terms of the problems in the industry, and what potential he sees in this product.
So, both as an investor and as a content creator, I'm super excited to talk about this. I think this is the kind of episode that everyone should be excited to learn more about because what Ticker Symbol U does and what Amit does is we often talk about really cool cutting edge ideas, as well as we get to interview founders that try to solve hard market problems. And this is an example of those things coming together in real time, right? So we're talking about people with investing backgrounds, people with content creation backgrounds, finding a real problem in the content market, in this case, the audio market. And instead of just talking about it on their content platforms, going out and trying to solve the problem in an innovative, cutting edge way, right? So one thing I'm really excited to get into is understanding in depth the market need and then how you're trying to solve it and if the solution makes sense, right?
That's one of the reasons I'm so happy you're investing, because you are, Ticker Symbol U. You're on the cutting edge. I think you're one of the main channels on YouTube that's really analyzing, and the quality of your videos over the past couple of weeks has been insane. Cutting edge technology and innovation, and people really appreciate and respect that. So when I pitched you, I really respected your opinion because you're someone who, outside of your background with technology and MIT, you see things and you really critically analyze them from a creative perspective because you've got the content side, and then from a real tech business perspective because you've also got that side as well. So I'm over the moon that you're actually investing, and I'm happy to get into it. One thing I want to say is after you listen to this, I would deeply appreciate if people check out the product. Obviously, I don't expect people to use it every day or every month or every week, but just to give your feedback on this product as one of the first iterations of it that's going to the world after 2 years, it would deeply mean the world to me. And if you get some value out of the product, then that would be phenomenal as well. But for anyone who has any dream or ambition or a hint of, hey, I want to start something, I want to bring it to the world, this episode right here is something to listen to, because we're going to describe what it takes to articulate that vision to the world, and then what it means to accept feedback around that vision when you give your product to the world. So we're here, and I'm happy to be here with Alex. Alex, here's the question. Well, let me start off with a quick explanation of the startup in the most simplest terms, and then I'm going to ask you what you think about this. We are trying to do what YouTube has done for video, but for audio. So our startup is in the creator economy space. The name of it is Audea, stands for Audio Idea. And the goal is, can we build a recommendation engine at scale in which all the creators of the world that create audio content, musicians, podcasters, poets, comedians, etc., can use their content or can distribute their content on our platform, and we can effectively recommend their content in a variety of ways to get their content discovered. The obvious need in the market that we're trying to solve is the fact that there is a lack of curation for audio. There's great curation for articles on Twitter, great curation of videos for YouTube and TikTok, and we see a lack of curation for audio on a major audio platform. Do you think there is a problem in the audio industry, and do you think there is an opportunity for us to potentially solve that if we build a recommendation engine for audio content?
Yeah, for sure. So let's just talk a little bit more about what's going on in audio, right? So I have about 10.5 million views on YouTube over the last 18 months, which is about how old my channel has been. And we started the podcast like roughly at the same time. And granted, so grain of salt here, my podcast is just the audio from my videos. So direct A to A comparison in the sense, or apples to apples, just in the sense that it's the same exact content, but it's made to be consumed by video. But we just looked up the stats right before the podcast. I have 500 times less downloads on audio than I do on YouTube. And by the way, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple, I'm on Google, I'm on Stitcher. I'm basically everywhere you can find the same content on like the audio platforms. Yep. And combined, 500 times less downloads. I have 22,000 downloads of my podcast and at 10.5 million views of that same exact content. So I do think there's a real need, and I'm definitely not the only creator that feels that way.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. This is something I recognized back in October 2020. I started looking at YouTube because I've been a heavy user of the platform and the other platforms, and I'm like, how do I know Alex? How do I know these creators? When was the moment where I even they pierced through my consciousness, and I became a fan of them. And it took a second. I was like, wait a second. The algorithm on the platform recommended them to me, and for some reason I got into their content, and then I became a fan, and they became a active part of my life. So when I researched the audio market, because I've been in audio for the past 4 or 5 years trying to scale a podcast, market a podcast, and I realized the audio platforms aren't recommending, because there's no reason why a creator has 10 million views on one platform and 22,000 on another, outside of the fact that one of those platforms is doing something a bit more helpful for the creator, which is recommending and curating their content in front of the audience that cares about tech, Kathy Wood, innovation, Arc Invest, all that type of stuff. So if the audio platforms aren't doing that, then that presents a gap in the market, which is, well, these platforms don't seem to be genuine recommendation engines for audio, because Spotify has 480 million people using it per month. You should have more than 2,000 people every other month discovering your content. So that's where we saw the market gap. Now, I want to talk a little bit here about RSS feeds versus curated content. For those who don't know what an RSS feed is, an RSS feed is an open, decentralized source of information. So in 2008, 2009, 2007, we had article RSS feeds. People got their news from these open source RSS feeds. Twitter killed that. The reason Twitter killed that, and the reason every journalist and knowledge worker is on Twitter, is because when you produce a written form of content, you need to distribute it somewhere that other people have a chance to see it. And posting on an open RSS feed that has no followers, has no AI, no machine learning, no algorithms to get your article about Palantir, for example, in front of people that care about Palantir, well, then your content's going to die, and you're not going to make content. You're not going to be motivated to make content. Twitter said, hey, put your news articles on our platform. We're going to get the users, and we're going to create algorithms to curate your news to those users. YouTube did the same with video. TikTok did the same with video. Audio has this archaic method of distribution of RSS feeds, which means your ticker symbol U podcast is on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Stitcher, Google, all these platforms. But if none of the platforms are actively curating the content to recommend it, does it actually matter? Can you speak a little bit to RSS feeds versus curation of content in a centralized platform?
Yeah, sure. So how I see that is I use a service called Buzzsprout. There are plenty of these services out there. And what happens is I upload the audio to this one platform, and then it handles the distribution of the audio via RSS feeds, just like you said, to things like Spotify, things like Apple, things like Google. And so what happens is somebody would have to essentially find and subscribe to me to that feed on whatever platform that they digest audio on. Right. And that's how I acquire a subscriber there. So that essentially requires them to know that my podcast exists, and or like stumble on it by chance by Googling me or however they try to get to my content. They don't discover it. They don't discover it organically by saying, hey, I'm looking for a talk on innovation. And then my podcast might be one of the ones that get fed to them, right? Compare that to my experience, at least as a creator on YouTube, where I do a little more work. For example, there's thumbnails, there's a little more work to get like a YouTube video posted than just posting a podcast RSS feed. But then up to 1 million people, if not more, can see that content. 1 million people that have no idea who I am. The same thing is true of my tweets on Twitter, and so on and so forth. And the real difference there is there's something called a viral loop. Which is basically this idea that it doesn't matter who you are, it matters what your content is, and it has the chance to go viral because there's algorithms supporting the discoverability of the content, not subscription to the artist, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And this is the problem that I see such a big opportunity, and it's going to be really hard to solve it, but the opportunity to me is glaring in the face. You said you're on all these different platforms, Amazon, Google, etc., on audio, in audio versions. But the only time people find you is if they're literally searching, ticker symbol U, which means why would they search for you? Well, you have a Twitter audience, an Instagram audience, a YouTube audience, and that audience is driving traffic to these decentralized RSS feeds in order for people to find it. So if you have 10,000 Twitter followers, hey, here's the Spotify link. They click on it or search on Spotify, and then they find you. That to me has been where audio has failed, because it's a logical fallacy. It's like, how am I going to get an audience if I don't have a pre-existing audience to be able to drive traffic to the audio version of my content? Well, you've got to build up another account. And it's like, that's fine. That's marketing. Everyone should try it. But it's really, really difficult to build a Twitter account, an Instagram account. And at the end of the day, it should be hard. It's content, but it shouldn't be this hard. Whereas on YouTube, I remember you made a video, I think back in November 2021, about the metaverse, when the metaverse was really trending. And because YouTube has the ability to get people to come to the platform because they organically find content that is interesting to them, your video got up to 1 million views. You did some packaging of that video, which was a lot more work than most podcasters do, which is upload their logo and then press publish, and then they're everywhere. You had to come up with a thumbnail, come up with a title, pick keywords that you knew people were interested in, spark interest and curiosity when people saw your content on their feed, and then get the click, which then allowed them to enter into your universe. That little bit of work 10x'd, the amount of opportunity you got from all that new audience, and it only
1000x.
1000x. And it only happened on a platform that actively said, hey, here's the content. We think this could work. Let's keep showing it to more people, because there were impressions, there were click-through rates, there was an average view duration. There was all these statistics that YouTube had proprietary data on to figure out how to get you an audience, because you're someone that wants to do this for a living. That's not happening in the audio world. And if someone could solve it, and maybe it's not me, I think it can be me, but maybe it's another big player. But I think if we do it, and I think there's a lot of business market opportunities for why we could do it, then I think that platform could be big. It's just a question of execution, but I think the gap in the market obviously exists.
I think that as an investor, one of the things I always look for is that key understanding of what a company does. And I think you just really eloquently said it, but let me just parrot it back to you just in the one-liner, right? It is impossible to get discovered as an audio-only artist today. You have to build some other audience somewhere else first, either via video on things like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, or via text on platforms like Twitter, right? You cannot build an audience starting with audio today, because there's no platform out there, at least to my knowledge as a content creator, where you can get discovered using audio-only content. Is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to change in the market?
1000%. That is the fair assessment. And it's fun that 2 years later, that's how it's boiled down. But for the first year, from 2020 to 2021, it was really coming to that conclusion. 2 + 2 needs to equal 4. And I'm like, okay, if the problem is there and the solution is there, it will equal 4, and this will be a gigantic company if we execute. But that problem and that solution must be there, because if you don't have a real problem, consumers are not going to care about your product. And if you don't have a meaningfully smart way to solve that problem, consumers are not going to get value out of your product. So I spent a year really internally debating before I pitched you, before I pitched anybody, on if this was a problem. And so, speaking from my experience, I talked to over 1,600 people on Zoom calls. How did I find these people? I begged them in Facebook groups. I was like, can I have 10 minutes of your time? They're like, get out of here. We don't know who you are. But eventually, enough people responded, and they were podcasters. And I just asked them some questions. I was like, are you getting discovered on Spotify, Apple? They're like, no. I'm like, why? They're like, well, people can't find us. I'm like, why aren't people finding you? It's like, I don't know. I post everywhere, and they just don't find us. And so then I realized, well, if the platform was pushing you, do you think they would find you? It's like, yeah, that's what Twitter does. That's what TikTok. I was like, oh, that doesn't exist for audio. So it's like there was so much demand from actual creators that could not find an audience, and then actual listeners that were like, I hate using these platforms because I want to listen to something, but I don't know what to listen to. There's these 3-hour-long podcasts. There's no way I'm going to give my attention to someone for 3 hours if I barely know them. And so that's where the idea was born of if we could create a hyper-specific search engine for audio with discovery, maybe that could work.
So let me ask you the question that I think every investor would have on their mind right away. Why would they not just go with YouTube? Why not just, YouTube already has music-only channels. YouTube Music is a thing that already has plenty of audio-only content where, the video is basically just a static or slightly dynamic background. What makes your business capable of being different than YouTube?
That's a great question. I'm really happy you answered that question, because this is another thing I was debating for the first 6 months, because I was like, I looked at YouTube. I was like, okay, they're the behemoth. If we do this, it's going to be a lot to compete with. Where is a piece of differentiation? I think there's a couple parts to this to understand. Number one, YouTube has a video advertising model. They get paid they make $30 billion a year because people watch ads, they click on ads, and advertisers come back. YouTube is one of the most annoying platforms in terms of turning off your phone if you don't have premium, because then the audio stops. And for 15 years, people have been complaining, I just want to listen to it without the phone. I want to save my battery. Why hasn't YouTube solved this problem? Well, the reason for this is because if they incentivize 2 billion people a month to not watch the video and to only get the audio from the video, which a lot of times is the most valuable part, they would lose their video advertising incentive. At the end of the day, they need to at least show advertisers, hey, we know maybe they're not maybe they don't care about the ad, but we know they're watching it because we're putting it in front of them. So I think at one level, YouTube is not a pure audio player because the functionality of closing the phone and using it just for audio goes away because of the business model and the incentives YouTube has to sell you video advertisements. That doesn't mean YouTube can't get into audio advertisements and things of that nature, but its core business is we need people to watch stuff, to sell them stuff in order for them for the business to continue. Number two, and this is the more simpler answer, is just that YouTube's very crowded. They get 500 hours of video uploaded per minute. And when I talk to audio creators about, hey, you're uploading your podcast on YouTube, how's it going? They're like, look, if we upload a blank image, no one's going to care, because we upload a blank image and you click on it. You're, as a user on YouTube, you're expecting a video and then you get nothing. And then you're like, well, I'm not going to watch this, especially if Mr. Beast is giving away $500,000 in my up next right there. That's way more clickable and that's going to keep me more engaged.
Right.
So boom, I'm going to click that. Very similar to how on Twitter or on Facebook, you don't post your tweets on Facebook, because a network is a network because it's a network. There are some things that are suited for particular networks, even though you could post tweets on Facebook. But what's the value of it if Facebook's more around the social graph and friends and family, whereas Twitter is literally everyone's almost a journalist or a knowledge worker creating content in that respect. So in that level, I think YouTube is not just, it's not necessarily suited to do the things that an audio-only platform can do because they have so much content. The third thing is the recommendation engine. Like at the end of the day, if you log out of your YouTube, and I advise everyone to do this today, and just watch YouTube without your being logged in, you're going to get a lot of videos, a lot of them from Mr. Beast, and a lot of things that are super generic, like eating the world's largest pizza. It's like, why is YouTube doing that? Because in the beginning, when they know nothing about you, they have to feed you something that you're going to click on. They have to feed you something you care about watching. At the end of the day, YouTube wants you to watch. And if they want you to watch the recommendation engine, it's going to be incredibly difficult to filter in all of this audio content. If you're a poet and you have these 5-minute poetry bits in which you don't want to be on camera, you don't want to go through the work and the barrier entry of creating a video, or even, hey, you made a video of you just talking in front of the camera and you put it into YouTube, YouTube has to do a lot of work with 500 hours of video uploaded per minute to figure out how your audio-only poetry bit is going to rank and get you thousands and thousands of people that care about you. And if you don't get those thousands of people, you're going to stop posting, right? You're not going to see a path to build an audience. So at that point, I think because it's so big, because they have video advertising infrastructure as the main incentive, and because the recommendation engine truly is built for video, it's not like they can't do this. It's just there's a gap in the market for a young little startup that's ambitious to go try and go after it. And if we do that, there's a potential in which YouTube, might like the startup, might want to buy the startup, or we actually have a chance to compete in our own niche because we've created our own network outside of YouTube.
Sure, yeah, and just to hammer that point home even harder, like Google has all the means to do this. They have YouTube. They also have Google Podcasts. So I would argue that they've made a conscious decision to not do it, right? Like, yep. There's no reason that they couldn't have done this to solve this problem, except they probably have other things that they're trying to do and accomplish, and this probably fell low to their list, seemingly by mistake, right? Because audio has a lot of creators that don't want to do exactly what me and you are doing right now, having to create a video, having to think about the thumbnail, having to think about how this fits in with the rest of our video content library. They just want to produce great audio content, and no platform is out there saying, hey, if you produce it, we will make sure that the right people who are looking for it are discovering you, right? Comedians, musicians, people who are not in the video game, they're in the audio game. So
right.
I think even though YouTube and Google both have these audio-focused products, YouTube Music and Google Podcasts, they're not using them for recommendation. They're using them like every other static RSS feed type platform where, you just throw your content out there and it's their job to just rake in dollars and get the biggest stars in front of the most people.
Yeah, and it really speaks to what YouTube Shorts has been having to do with TikTok, right? So TikTok created a differentiated way for video to be uploaded, but at the end of the day, YouTube Shorts copied them within a couple months. It was pretty easy once they figured out how to do it. Why is TikTok still around? Why does TikTok have 57 million downloads as the most downloaded app in Q2? Like, because a network is a network because it's a network. People, the big tech companies also have kind of manipulated us sometimes into feeling they're the only things that exist. And I'm not against big tech by any way. I really appreciate what they've done. But there's a lot of time where people just want to feel something new. It's why people aren't doing Instagram, because it feels kind of fake and out there. But TikTok's this like vibrant atmosphere. And when you try to replicate a short 30-second video on a platform where it's meant to see ticker symbol use 18-minute long, deep dive, it's a really weird combination. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but when I see these short little things on the side, I'm like, it's just annoying to see those things because that's not what I'm on YouTube for. So I think in the same respect, it's really difficult to like manufacture something and do something different. Even Facebook added podcast RSS feeds in June 2020 when Clubhouse was blowing up, which is a live audio platform, and they shut it down 3 months ago because no one wanted to listen to podcasts on Facebook. People want to see their friends and family get married, right? So I
That's
think
right.
there's a room for a lot of opportunities for different products to exist, but you've got to build a moat around that content.
No, I think that's a great point. Yeah, these platforms are just not designed to do what you're saying you're trying to do. I completely agree.
Moving on to content discovery, can you just speak to, as a creator, like how difficult you think it is to get content discovered and the niches that audio can thrive in, like musicians and comedians and poets and podcasters and the hundreds of millions of people that want an audience around the world, the 3 billion people that are not on the internet that one day will be on the internet and they're going to want to express themselves as well. Can you kind of speak to the niches and gaps that an audio recommendation engine could build an audience for and then get those creators discovered at scale?
Sure. I mean, like, let's just think about the basics. Stand-up comedians, right? If I don't know your name, I'm probably not clicking your video because on YouTube, you're next to guys like Louis C.K. and Bill Burr and all the greats, right? And so when I see a face I don't recognize, I'm much less likely to click it. But that's a byproduct of needing a face on a thumbnail and needing a title and needing all of these things that are artifacts of the video, right? I want to see Louis C.K. and I want to hear jokes, right? When I think about that same use case on audio, I just want to hear funny stand-up comedy, right? I want to either hear, open mics. I want to hear, there's all these different variants on comedy, 30-minute specials, 3-minute open mics. There's, I forget what the competitive one is called, but like there's all this opportunity for like really, really niche down audio content that just, you can't go get it anywhere. I have no idea how to even search for that. Right. Yeah. And that's just one example. Another example could be just straight up music, right? Like help me, besides Pandora, which still requires you to do things like seed it with a specific song and it tries to pull elements from that song. But if you're just like, hey, I want to hear really cool new types of music, where do you even go to do that? Right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. It's like if you want comedy and you're compared to Louis C.K. and Kevin Hart, it's really hard to get my attention. But if you're on a new platform like the TikTok comedians were a year ago, like you just popped up and now I'm consuming you and maybe I like you and then I'll be interested in you. In the context of creator platforms that have the creators that come first, do you think there is a competitive advantage to, if we succeed on the marketing side, getting creators to upload their content, because it's this really interesting self-fulfilling prophecy that if I'm there first and there's more attention, there's more demand than there is supply, I'm going to have the opportunity to capture that demand. If you were one of the first people on YouTube, you might have built a brand. Do you think there's that angle to building the startup that could be successful?
I do. I think you're going to get all sorts of, you're going to be very attractive to all sorts of talent, right? And so my immediate follow-up question to you is, what happens if Kevin Hart or Louis C.K. immediately says, I'm in, I want to jump on your platform? How do you stop them from just dominating because they're already famous and they're already bringing in an audience from anywhere else? Do you foresee yourself having any sort of protection so that content creators like me and other smaller content creators have a fighting chance? Like, how do you deal with that?
I actually think it's one of the best things that could happen for the platform, because if Kevin Hart joins tomorrow, at a baseline, I'm going to be super optimistic. He brings 100,000 people just because he puts a tweet or Instagram post about it. Those 100,000 people are now coming to a platform that has, so far we have 10,000 audios on the platform. Maybe we'll have 20,000 in a month or two. That's still there's still a ratio of supply and demand that is better. So like, I think there needs to be big creators that join the platform before the platforms truly gets absolute scale. So like on TikTok, a year ago, I think Justin Bieber joined before like Will Smith and the crazy other big celebrities. And that was a great arbitrage for Justin Bieber and for the other musicians. Because if I care about Justin Bieber and like love songs, and if you're a romantic love singer and you pop up next to Justin Bieber, but I came because of Justin Bieber, now I have a gateway top of the funnel brand awareness to at least discover who you are because Justin Bieber got me in. So I think it's a question of like in the beginning 2 to 3 years, if you get some of those big guys, yeah, they're going to have some fun on the platform, but they're also going to bring the audience necessary to get other people discovered, which is beneficial. But also it's a question of algorithms and making sure smaller accounts still have the ability to show up, which I think they will because there's just lack of demand over supply.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what creators really want to hear, right? When I go on YouTube, I'm already in a saturated market. And
Yeah.
YouTube does a decent job of making content discoverable, but again, the point is it does that for video primarily. That if
Yeah.
you watch my channel at all, a lot of production value gets spent on the video side of things purely to keep people engaged, because I know that even though all of the information is coming across as audio, people leave if the video doesn't really capture attention and drive you to stay engaged and so on and so forth. I would love an audio only platform where I could not be talking to a camera, where I could be talking to a mic, and I could just say, hey, here's what I really think about the future. Here's what I think about the metaverse, and here's what I think about cybersecurity, and all of the things I just genuinely want to talk about without having to package it in a way that demands so much visual engagement to tell my audio story, right? Does that make sense? Like why I think that there would be such a, as a videographer, why I think there's such a big need for this audio only platform?
Yeah, because the barrier to entry to create video is hard. Like you and me both grow our channels. You did it in a really great way with your analysis. I focused on mainly one stock, and that's how I kind of grew. But honestly, we got kind of lucky finding some keywords that were not tapped into the market. Me for Palantir, you for ARK Invest. And then we became aggressive because we're hard workers and we're consistent to provide quality content. But it had to be quality video content, and it had to be rooted around this niche, and we had to find it magically, and then that allowed us to blossom. That's just very difficult for your average New York Knicks podcaster that just wants some more people to listen to their thoughts about the New York Knicks. And if you try to just put up a random video on YouTube that really isn't engaging, it's going to be difficult to get distribution in that respect. But on an audio platform, you might get 10,000 people that care more about the Knicks. I have a question for you now around why the big players like Spotify and Apple haven't solved this problem. What do you think they have been lacking or haven't cared about to really allow user-generated content to become discovered?
Yeah, I just think they have a very different business model, right? They're trying to get they're trying to get what they consider the best content in front of the most people. So like, let's just use Spotify as an example. They paid Joe Rogan $100 million to be exclusive to their platform. So what are they going to push? Of course, they're going to try to get Joe Rogan as many views as possible, as many listens as possible, I guess. And that's the only place you can go listen to him. So they have no incentive of pushing the little guy. They want to take that investment and drive all sorts of engagement. You know, even YouTube kind of has this problem to some extent. It's much easier for news networks and big celebrities to go viral than it is for the average content creator. There's been a lot of, data science and a lot of people making videos about how hard it is to engage with that same viral loop as a regular creator if you're not on Mr. Beast's level or Marques Brownlee's level.
Late night with Jimmy Kimmel.
Exactly. Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, all those guys, it's much easier. The threshold for them to get in front of everyone is much lower. Why? I'm sure there's some financial incentive for YouTube to do that, for Spotify to do that, like we just covered. The discoverability of small artists, it's questionable what the return of that investment is. So when you have deep pockets, you're going to go for the risk-free return, right? You're going to go for I know Joe Rogan's popular. I know Joe Rogan is easy to listen to. I know his numbers already. So I'm just going to buy that show and put it in front of everyone instead of take a chance on a guy like Alex or Amit, right?
Yeah, and so this is another big sort of part of my thesis. This is another huge gap in the market that I've recognized. And when this light bulb went off a couple years ago, I really sort of had more conviction in my idea. When Spotify spent $100 million on Joe Rogan, which was part of $800 million on exclusive podcast content. The reason they're not profitable is because they've convinced investors, give us some time. We spent this money on podcasts. It's going to work out. And it might work out. And I think Spotify is a phenomenal company, and I love their product. The problem is, in the context of the creator economy, you cannot buy people off and then tell creators our platform is friendly to you. It is impossible for me for that to make sense. If I'm a chess creator and I go to Netflix, I get Queen's Gambit. If I go to YouTube, I'll find some random kid in India explaining how to do the Queen's Gambit move. And like there's a whole world of difference there. Number one, that user-generated content platform gets creators discovered, monetized, and offers them so much opportunity for just like success because they have an audience. The other platform gives you some entertainment with watching a highly produced Queen's Gambit, but that's it at the end of the day. So if Spotify has made the conscious decision to say, you know what, we don't know what Alex from ticker symbol U is going to be like, but we know Joe Rogan's going to be great, then that means the monetization of Joe Rogan and the advertisements they sell against it and the top of the funnel to get you into the product to buy the subscription, which is really what they're being valued for as a public company, the $10 a month, how many more they can get, that's going to be front and center. More importantly, in the context of music, which is where Spotify came from, they make $8 billion a year from record labels in marketing and promotion. What does that mean? That means when Ariana Grande, Drake, Justin Bieber, Beyonce, they come out with a new song or album, it is front page, it is home and center, it is dominating the playlist. If someone's giving you $8 billion a year, you're not going to take some random artist from Missouri that may be the next Justin Bieber and get them discovered. Ironically, Justin Bieber was discovered on YouTube. He popped up in 2007, and that's where Scooter Braun found him because he saw this video of this kid singing. Without YouTube, we may not have a Justin Bieber. So to me, I'm like, okay, if the audio companies have decided to go that route, the Netflix of audio route, what could be the theoretical YouTube of audio route? And if we build that, how big could it be for the next potential Justin Biebers of the world to get discovered, Ariana Grande's to find their audience, and we be the platform that facilitates that? And that's where I see the opportunity.
Well, I think also that's where your moat is, right? Because what happens is when that artist gets discovered on your platform, yeah, they might get ported over to other platforms eventually or whatever. But like you just said, Justin Bieber got discovered on YouTube because YouTube was the only toolkit that let that happen, right? So when that next megastar gets discovered on your platform, for a while, that's the only way to see him. And so what'll happen is you'll become known as the platform that starts being able to discover the next generation of talent, not just put the current generation of talent in front of people for money, right? Those are two fundamentally different businesses. Just because they're both audio doesn't mean they have a lot in common.
And I think you play into that. So TikTok, if you go on TikTok, the profile literally allows you to connect your Instagram and YouTube on your profile. Now, people would think that's counterintuitive because as soon as you do that, people leave the platform. But TikTok's like, we're not going to beat Instagram and YouTube like just going head on. We're going to serve as a gateway funnel to get you more of an audience there. But if we get you discovered here, you're never going to leave. You're going to come back because you're going to want to get more people to go to your Instagram and YouTube. So it just makes sense to be that short size snippet platform to get people to go to the more longer form in the context of TikTok. Okay. Last thing I want to say, I want to take a minute of explaining the philosophy of the platform, and the follow-up question will be based on that philosophy. I'm building this because I have a philosophy on my life that is called motivated by mortality. I started thinking about death and being conscious of death when I was in college. I think I started thinking about it more deeply than a lot of my peers, which led me to say, okay, at 20 years old or 22 when I left college, I'm not going to make six figures working at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. I'm going to take 2 years, work a job that I kind of like, kind of don't like, but it gives me flexibility to build my startup and get to the point where I can build this. These past 2 years have been a journey. It's been really difficult. There are some days I woke up in the morning not knowing what I was going to do, but just pierce through it. And then you get to this moment. The reason for this is because I have this belief that people before they die want to feel like they had a meaning and purpose to their life. And my subjective belief, which I think is a bit more universal than just my subjectivity, is the way to find meaning and purpose. There's a lot of ways, but one of the biggest ways is to create something and have people care about what you create. The self-expression of one's identity, whether it's through audio, podcast, whatever it is, and building a genuine audience of just like 1,000 people that really care about your weekly podcast, your weekly video, that matters before you die because you created something into the world. You got the world to feel it a little bit, even if it was a sliver of the 8 billion people that were here, and those comments, those notifications, those emails to you about how you made their life better, whether it's entertainment or information or something, it means something. I think objectively, universally, creativity is one of the forms of salvation for the tragedy of being a human, because being a human is very tragic. It's difficult to be a human being. That philosophy has motivated me to get here to this point. So my last question to you is, what is your advice to me as someone who's older and has a lot more experience just building stuff over the next 5-10 years building the startup?
Honestly, I think you just got to do it, right? Like, I know that sounds so cliche and that's so like vague and maybe a little bit unhelpful. So, and we'll break it down in a conversation. But the worst thing you can do is overplan in the beginning, especially in the very beginning, because the hurdles that you are going to find are hurdles you cannot plan for and that are unforeseen, right? There is no platform right now that does what you're trying to do, right? That's why you're trying to do it. So it'd be really silly for me to be like, well, YouTube used to do it this way and they learned that mistake. But the truth is you're going to find problems that are deep in the code, right? There's going to be problems with the recommendation algorithm. You're going to hire somebody that's not working out. You're going to, right, like try marketing a certain way and it's going to bust and it's not going to return and you're going to be sweating bullets over the money. There's so many things that are going to be gotchas along the way that I think the best advice I can give as somebody who's trying and failing sometimes to build my own business, right, is one foot in front of the other, and then as the problems come, make sure you have both eyes open and you understand all your options and how to deal with them. Meaning, get good with money, right? Understand your financing options. Get good with programming. Maybe you're not the guy who's building the algorithms, but at least learn how to like read the code and make sure that people are commenting it so they can get transferred to the next guy. Learn the basics of project management, right? Learn how to build a really good Gantt chart because people are going to live and die by the schedule, especially when it only has a few employees, right? Get really good at understanding the vocab for marketing, right? Understand what a good metric for return on ad spend is and what you should be trying to hit. Understand the economics of influencer marketing. If you're trying to get a big influencer on your platform, it'd be good to get somebody to help redline your first contract. So I think like that, all that I'm trying to say with one foot in front of the other is when you hit the next problem, and there will be infinity, try to remember that the problem has a solution. And maybe it's a problem you can avoid altogether and say, hey, do I really need to do this? But if you do, don't be afraid to lean on experts and say, hey, I need somebody to walk me through redlining my first contract, making my first influencer spend budget for advertising, blah, 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 right? Like it's a how, not a if. So one foot in front of the other is definitely my advice.
That means a lot to me, Alex. That means a lot. Means the absolute world. I remember you were one of the first people I called to pitch. You were also one of the first people I called when we had other things going on, and you were there for me. I mean, you were there. You picked up the phone and you stayed on the phone for 20 minutes, just talking me through it, helping me when I got nervous about certain things. And you know, your investment is subsidizing my ability to go chase my dreams at this age, which is I can't even express how much that means to me because very few people get to actually go chase those wild dreams that they have. So it means the world, and hopefully one day I can give you a return on that investment if we pull this off. So also the other cool thing about Alex being an investor as well is that obviously he wants to see some growth in the platform and see how the platform can do. So ticker symbol use content has moved in audio format onto Audea. And it will hopefully find a new audience and blossom on that platform as well. So if anyone's interested in the audio versions of ticker symbol use content or Alex's content, you can find that on Audea. And the Catalyst, this new podcast that we're doing that we set out to do about a couple of months ago, where we had this idea of this like Lex Friedman of finance, that's also going to be audio exclusive on Audea. So anytime we come out with a new guest, talking to a public CEO or just chopping it up about the market, you guys can load up the Audea app if you just want the audio version of that and check it out right on that platform as well. And just as a reminder, the Catalyst podcast, this one is going to be moving to a brand new channel. We think it's best for the actual growth of the podcast to be independent on a new channel and develop its own audience on YouTube. That channel will be linked on the description, and the Audea channel for the audio versions of the Catalyst will also be linked in the description that you guys can check out as well.
So obviously as a content creator and an investor, I'm super pumped to already be on your cap table and be invested into your company and your project. Can you tell everyone else how they can get involved and how they can help support your vision?
Yeah, so one of the unique things about this this startup is that we are leveraging the power of social media and technology. And in today's day and age, you don't have to go to a bank, you don't have to go to a VC firm. You can directly give your message to an audience and see if the audience actually cares enough to put their money into a product if they believe in it. So before I get into the details about this, let me give one really big disclaimer. Startups are risky. Startups are very, very risky. If you make an investment in a startup that is relatively unproven, that is not a public company, that doesn't have all the regulations around it, you should be prepared, and I will not sugarcoat this, to lose the entire investment. It's something Alex is prepared to do because he's in a financial situation where he can afford to do that. And it should be anyone, whether it's $100 or $10,000, you should be prepared to lose this money. So if you are not at all prepared to be 100% okay over the next 5 years to see your money go to zero, do not make the investment because it is risky. There is a chance it could go big. There's a chance it could flop. 90% of startups tend to fail. I think I could be in the 10% that do win, but more likely than not, there might be an opportunity this doesn't work out. So that's the one thing I want to say before anyone thinks of even investing.
Even if it doesn't go to zero, you're going to be illiquid for a while, right? Because it's not a publicly traded company. There's no market maker for it. So this is money you're locking up, whether you lose it or not. So please be aware of that as well.
Yeah, this is money. Like, let's say the startup does do well over the next 5 years and you invested $5,000 in 2022. You may not see a return on that in the next decade because it takes a long time for startups to get to exit and become liquid. So if you have a portion of your investment portfolio that you want to allocate to very high risk plays that could go to zero, that's the only reason you should invest, not if you think there's going to be a return or it's a guaranteed return, because that is not the case. And that's what the platform we're using also explains. If you click the link in the description, it gives you all these details, all these disclosures. It is called WeFunder.com. It's a phenomenal platform that allows crowdfunding. WeFunder is registered with the SEC. And the beautiful thing about this is that they allow non-accredited investors to invest. So non-accredited investors are people that make less than $200,000 a year for the past 3 years, or less than $1 million of net worth, excluding a house. If you are in that category, like most people, you are a non-accredited investor. Now, in 2016, the Obama administration passed a law that allowed non-accredited investors, before 2016, it was not allowed, to actually invest in startups, because the way the administration thought of it was like, why do only rich people get access to the best private opportunities? Why can't non-accredited investors have those opportunities? Now, as a result of that, there are a lot of more disclosures, there's more regulations, because you want to protect non-accredited investors. That's why you should understand you could lose the investment, but at least you have the opportunity to do that. WeFunder allows you to invest with a minimum of $100, so you can literally put $100 into this minimum to invest. And it could go up to as much as 5, 10, 15, 25,000. The average investment check we have right now, I would say, is around 10,000, 7,500, in that range. So if you are interested, you can invest by clicking that link in the description and allocate a portion of your portfolio to this. In that time, when you invest, you will get a bunch of documents that explains the valuation of the company, how much your equity, what does it look like, all that type of stuff. I can't say that just for legal reasons. So when you go through all the documents, you'll be able to go through all that same information everyone else has. And then you'll be able to make the investment if you want to make the investment. The other cool thing about this is we have a lot of investors on the cap table that are content creators, like Alex. And so that's the interesting thing about this as well. Tom Nash is investing. He's a finance content creator. We have a channel called Freelance Finance that they create videos on YouTube, but they also work for Netflix and CBS, and they edit a lot of their movies because they're in the show business. So we have a lot of people who are investing who are content creators who are struggling with this problem and deeply resonate with that problem, which is why I think our cap table is pretty unique, because the investors are the people that would use the product in the first place, which is why they're so excited to invest. Final thing I'll say is the beauty of using WeFunder is that you don't have to worry about your signature ever being involved. WeFunder essentially is one line on the cap table. A cap table is basically the list of people that have invested in your company, and they're allocated as an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, which means I only need one lead investor that I trust with all my heart and soul, that if, hey, I need your signature because we're doing something big, I can get your signature, and that person represents the 100 or 200 people that all might have given $100 to $200 or $10,000, whatever it is. That person's name is Chris Patel. Chris is one of my best friends. We've talked for a long time. He was one of the first initial investors. He's that one guy I can count on no matter what if I need a signature. So if something happens, you don't have to worry about signing documents or anything like that. That's the one person that will be able to lead the entire crowdfund. And monthly on the WeFunder portal, you will get updates on users and growth and how the startup is doing every single month. So you'll be able to track the investment over time. So if you're interested, you can click the link. And if not, then thank you for at least listening and hearing out the idea.
Yeah, I think it's so awesome that we're using a podcast to showcase like the opportunities and this awesome opportunity in the audio space. It's really come full circle.
Yeah, it's just crazy because, you in order to get something off the ground, you do need some money. Now, there was 2 years of me and my co-founder bootstrapping it and doing what we needed to do and putting, thousands of dollars of our own money to get this to this point. But to scale anything, you need some money. And to develop an audience and to pitch a message to the world that actually can hopefully resonate with the message and then actually get to allocate their dollars into something and regular people believe in it. It's the power of social media technology and the fact that regulations have changed, and it's just a prime opportunity to do this.
That's awesome, man. Well, as a content creator and an investor, I'm excited to be a small part of your journey.
Excited for it. Thank you, Alex.